Alright guys, what's going on? I'm actually here tonight with the Dark Scholar, one of my favorite authors on Reddit. I've featured several of his stories on my YouTube channel before. He also has a book out, which I'll leave the link in the description down below. You should go check it out. It's the Nexus Chronicles, Volume 1. A bunch of fantastic stories in that book. So we'll dive a little bit into that today. So, the Dark Scholar, how are you doing tonight?
I am doing great. Thankfully, right before you set up this interview, the muse had just come back to me.
Oh, brilliant. You got that creative itch.
Absolutely, yes.
Awesome. So, is the Dark Scholar your birth given name? Or are you okay with sharing like what your actual name is?
In
If
a
not,
way,
that's fine.
the Dark Scholar could be considered to be my birth name. The birth of the character that you well know, as well as anyone else that's read the book will know. But no, it is not the name that my mother had given me. I like to keep my professional and personal lives separate, you know?
Yeah, that's fair. That's absolutely fair. I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to ask, like, how long have you been writing for? Is this something that's like recently attracted you in the last few years, or is it something that's been going on for a while?
Oh, wow. Well, one could say that I had been professionally writing for around a year now, but I have been writing as a passion of mine since high school, around junior year is when I really decided to give it my all and give into my dream.
That's awesome. Like, so do you have plans for the future with your writing? Like, do you want to get on that New York Times bestseller list, or are you just kind of riding the canoe, see where the current takes you?
Well, God willing, yeah, I would love to be on the New York Times, but as you said, I'm just mostly going along with the tides, just doing my work, just writing all that I can, whatever comes to my head, whatever comes out of my heart, I put it to paper, and we see where things go.
Which is awesome, because I've been looking at your work for a while now. I guess we've known each other for a while. This is our first like real voice to voice interaction, which is cool. I'm a little bit starstruck in a way because you are one of my favorite authors, and I'm not trying to kiss your ass here, but you are one of my favorite authors on the internet, and so I felt like this interview needed to happen because you need that plug, and I hope anybody listening is paying attention to this.
Well, thank you. That makes me very happy to hear that.
Yeah, of course. So you started writing back in high school. Did you have anyone that was like an inspiration to you that made you want to start writing?
Well, I suppose you could say that life inspired me, which sounds cliche, I know, but it's the truth. When it comes down to inspiration, I suppose when you could say style and things like that, I was mostly inspired by the books that I read. Everything I learned about writing, I actually did not learn from a classroom. Like, to this day, I cannot tell you what, in God's name, onomatopoeia is. Can't remember it for the life of me, or anything like that. Everything I learned from reading. I loved reading from a very young age. One could say that stories have been a part of me since before even I can remember.
Wow. So did you have like a specific series of books that you liked to read when you were younger?
I read almost every single genre known to man. I love stories, both old and new. I absolutely adored Shakespeare's work, for instance. I love Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I read Dracula. I love the old school horror, as well as new school stuff.
Yeah, so I can see that in your writing. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that to you. I'm nervous. Continue.
Don't be. I'm just a man at the end of the day, just like you.
Right.
But I could tell you one thing. I was always fascinated with the supernatural and the macabre, darker themed stories, mostly because when characters, at least through my eyes, when characters and people are backed into a corner, that's when you truly see who they really are, whether they're cowardly or courageous, selfish or selfless. And I love it because the one problem I felt with stories, most stories, is that they're always this idealized version of a person, and most people
Right.
can't relate to that. I'd rather, when people read my stories, that people can see themselves in the characters, like, wow, that could be me. You know, they're ordinary people put into extraordinary situations. And that's where I liked it. So the day came in high school when my friend, Rene Casares, good man, helped me a lot on this book, introduced me to the creepypasta subgenre.
Oh, that's when it happened.
Yes, and from that moment, my whole life changed. I started listening to narrators, much like yourself. I believe the first one I listened to was King Spook, and then I listened to the legends, Mr. Creepypasta, Creeps McPasta, and I just started devouring all these stories. I loved them. They were stories that were just, they were like modern, modern folk tales, you know, and I loved them.
Yeah, exactly.
And I had to become a part of that community. And, well, the rest is history.
Yeah, that's where you are today. Hopefully we can get you cemented, or I mean, it'd be your work. Get more like cemented in that. I don't know, like along with Vincent Vicava and Slime Beast and all that stuff. Eventually.
I would be honored if the day ever came that somebody would mention my name in the same breath. I mean, I don't know, but I would really be honored to have such a thing happen. Yes.
No, I heard you say you were really inspired by like classical horror works, and I have to say I see that a lot in your writing. Like there are sentence structures, and not necessarily like you're using Old English, but the way you go about telling the story is it's very descriptive, and it's kind of got like this elegance to it, and it comes out a lot. I just wanted to note that because I thought it was interesting, because I've noticed that in pretty much all of your work.
Well, thank you. I try. No, try is not the word. Whenever I write, I suppose that I do my best to get inside the mindset of whatever character's perspective it is that I'm writing. I want it to seem like every character that exists, from I Remember all the way over to the Nexus and every other story in between, here and now, I want them to have a voice. I want them to seem like real people, regardless of whether or not they're even human. I want them to seem real in the minds of the reader while they're reading the story.
Right.
And so I feel like that bleeds into my work, because take the professor, for instance, from the Nexus Chronicles in the final story. Yeah. His voice, or her voice, is very different than, let's say, the AI from I Remember.
Right.
You could tell from the get-go they're not the same person at all. And yet, they're all somehow connected in this multiverse across time and space, and you could feel the echoes of their stories throughout them all.
Right, which is really cool, because it's almost like it's some of the stories are very direct in the way they relate to each other, but some other stories don't necessarily mesh exactly until you start reading deeper into it, and you're like, oh, wait, no, something similar to that happened in this other story, and they all kind of connect subtly to each other.
Well, thank you. That's what I was going for. I'm glad it worked out that way.
You hit it home.
The odd thing is that there was no plan for this. I always wanted to write a book, mind you, but the Nexus Chronicles somehow just spawned with no plan. For instance, when I first wrote I Remember, I was in college. It was a short little story, and I was inspired to write it by the narrator Litterbot and the music from Myuu. you might remember Disintegrating. It's a very popular piece that you can hear in a lot of creepypasta songs. I saw the artwork. Yeah. I saw the artwork. And I remember listening to Litterbot's narrations. And somehow the music, the artwork, that narrator all came together and gave birth to I Remember in my mind. And I had to write it.
So was that like a one-night thing, or did that take several days?
No. It was a one-day thing for I Remember. I couldn't finish the story until later that night. But here's the funny thing. As soon as I finished that story, I was tired. It was a late night. I was working on school projects. And I lay my head down on the pillow, and then, bam! Harbinger popped into my head, and I immediately went, damn it, and I started typing all over again. Needless to say, I did not get much sleep that night.
No, I wouldn't think so.
Nope.
So that really kind of like answered my next question for you. Like, does your inspiration for all these stories, does it vary from case to case? Like, what inspires you, or do you draw a lot of inspiration from specific aspects like music or artwork?
Yes and no. Inspiration comes from all kinds of things for me. I Remember was inspired by art, music, and narrations from a fellow narrator, whereas Harbinger was something that popped into my head, something that was more than likely cooking in the back of my subconscious for some time and piecing it together until it was ready to come out onto the page. And then there comes the sequel to I Remember, the direct sequel, mind you.
Right.
Reaching for the Stars.
That's my favorite.
Well, thank you. Reaching for the Stars was something that you could say was a bit inspired by fans, but also inspired by my personal trials in life. Because I remember showing I Remember to several different people at the time when I first wrote it, and they were asking me, okay, Dark, so what happens afterwards? What happens afterwards? And I'm like, nothing. It was a one-off, that's it. And they're like, no, there isn't. There has to be more. I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you.
We need the prequel.
What ends up happening is that I was walking along in the public library of my town. I was going through a very rough time in my life at that point, and somehow walking and listening to music while surrounded by hundreds, if not thousands of different stories all around me, the smell of paper in my nose, and I was just... Somehow, I Remember just popped into my head, and I started listening to music by Hans Zimmer that time, and the story practically told itself. I wrote most of it, like at least 80 to 90% of it in a single day, but wow. I couldn't finish it. I could not finish it until that ordeal in my life was over, and only then, once that turmoil that was going on inside my body finally dissipated, could I finally finish the story. And I don't mean to toot my own horn, but when I finished Reaching for the Stars, I impressed myself. I couldn't believe that I had written an ending that was just so perfect.
Yeah, that story, for me, like I said, it's my favorite. It's so beautifully constructed, and it answers so many questions without being overbearing. If you guys want to hear that story, I'll leave a link in the description to both the story on Reddit as well as the narration I did of it. But that's crazy to think that it came from a time in your life where you were going through like all this turmoil, like the people in the story were, like conflicts of emotions and just crazy stuff happening and everything kind of going wrong at that point.
Yeah. Like for instance, and I Remember, you might remember the line that Robert said to Francine very early in the story. For someone so smart, you really are stupid, aren't you?
Yes.
That line was an actual line of thought towards a friend of mine. She was going through that hectic time right along with me. And I held her in very high regard. She was like a sister to me. But she would make decisions that I just simply did not agree with. But I never brought it up to her. However, I could not help that line of thought repeating itself in my head. For someone so smart, you really are stupid, aren't you? And those thoughts and those feelings bled into my work. And, well, the rest is history.
The rest is history. So, would you say that, I mean, you said you surprised yourself with it. Would you say that's like your favorite story that you've written, or do you have one that you're the most proud of, that anytime anybody asks, like, oh, can I have a sample of your writing, this is the go-to story that you give them?
I would say that Reaching for the Stars is my personal favorite story that I've written, but I would say that my best written story, the most well-written one, would actually be The Nexus. Whenever someone asks for a sample of my work, I prefer to hit them with The Nexus because I feel that from the get-go, from the first paragraph, from the first sentence, it will grab the reader. I might be giving myself a big old head and a huge inflated ego by saying so, but I feel that from the very first paragraph from The Nexus, the cold bite of the northern winds sank deep into my bones as I trudged along the snow-covered path. I feel like that line really just grabs you. You're like, okay, wow. But I don't know.
No, it 100% does. Because you can't read something like that and be like, well, where is he? Why are they there? It doesn't sound like a great time. I want to know. I want to know what's going on.
Well, I'm glad it worked out that way.
So, is it okay if I ask where you grew up, or is that a little too personal?
It's quite all right. I am an open book. I just,
yeah, I never want to step on anybody's toes in terms of privacy because it's the internet. I get
it's quite all right.
100%.
Without mentioning any specific location, I will say that I grew up in South Texas, where it is constantly summer, no matter what time of the year it is.
Right.
And I am sad to say that the area that I live in is the most illiterate area in the entire state of Texas. While that doesn't make people here good or bad, like any more so than anyone else, it did make my writing career a bit more difficult than I feel it would have been elsewhere.
Right.
But it also gave me a strong sense of community and family, because here in the South, there's this thing where it's just like we protect what is ours.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm from the North Houston area, so I completely understand that aspect, and especially being from Texas, even if you aren't proud of some things going on in the state, you're still proud of your state.
Yeah, Texas has a very, well, I would say patriotic, but that is something more akin to a country. But there's a specific pride that a lot of Texans have, as you well know.
Yeah.
Like, there's this saying I like to say about Texans in general. Like, we all hate each other, but we hate everyone else even more.
Yes, that is the perfect description for the area. 100%.
Absolutely.
So, it makes me think, though, because if you grew up in an area like that where there wasn't a lot of writing and stuff, it probably do you think it developed your voice because you didn't have somebody saying as much like, oh, you need to do this way, you need to do this that way? It kind of, it gave you a sense of individuality, maybe?
I had never once considered it that way, but you might be right about that. I never thought of it that way. I mean, there weren't. Go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that's like a lot what draws me to your work is because the moment I start off a sentence, different stories of yours don't necessarily sound the same, but I know who wrote it. You know what I mean? You have a very distinct style to you.
Well, thank you. I really never considered it that way before. But you may be right. That could be a positive that I could take away from all this. I was always saddened by the fact that there weren't a lot of people that I could talk to about this. Whenever mentioning something about writing or even reading or anything of the like, most of the time I would get this confused, far off look by most people because most people just, they had nothing to say towards what I was saying. I always felt different from my neighbors and my friends. I just felt like I did not belong here. I never felt alone. I just never felt that I was meant to be here. But you telling me this, that it may have helped develop my own individual style, my own voice, is something that I feel like I can finally take a positive aspect of my life out of this whole experience. And I'd like to thank you for that.
Oh yeah, 100%, man. Like, I'm one of the big things that I always think about is that wherever you're from, it's going to have an effect on what you go forward doing. And
absolutely.
It's just, it's an interesting thought to have. I am not doing well with talking today, so I'm sorry about that.
It's all right. It's quite all right.
I've had 2 soccer games today. I'm getting it. We'll get it. It'll be fun.
Oh, you play soccer?
I do. Yes.
Yes, everything's fine, everybody. Wow, that was interesting. I didn't know. Was not aware that you played soccer.
Yeah, I actually I've played since I was 5. I played in college, and it's just been a huge part of my life. And actually, one of the reasons I got into listening to creepypastas is because I would go on these like out-of-state tournament trips where I didn't want to listen to music the whole time because eventually it gets old, and that's kind of where it started to snowball. Was I stumbled upon a story by Mr. Creepypasta, and it was just all downhill from there. It is what it is.
I get that. Hey, whenever it's not so hot, which is usually only at night around here, sometimes I like to go for a walk and I'll listen to a story, a creepypasta by Mr. Creepypasta, Creeps McPasta, or perhaps you. You've narrated quite a few good ones. But it's a very nice way to relax. I usually go to sleep while listening to my playlist of creepypastas. I also like to think that somehow me listening to them and falling asleep to creepy stories will help stimulate the creative juices in my brain, Okay. See if they can help me out.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I also listen to creepypastas to go to sleep. I feel like I'm weird for this, but if I listen to a story that I'm like just engaged in that I can't go to sleep with, I have nightmares and I get excited for the nightmares because I wake up the next morning and be like, oh, that story was so intense.
Absolutely.
It may be weird that I get excited over having nightmares, but I'm just being honest with myself. So
I'll tell you what, it's a lot more interesting than just the endless black void of sleep. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of speaking of narrators, other than myself, who would you consider like your top 3 narrators? And then who would be the narrator that you would want the most to read your work or would deliver it the best?
Well, that is tough. I will definitely say that due to him helping inspire the work that would eventually go on to spawn my entire book, I would definitely say I want Litterbot to narrate the areas where the AI shows up. I would definitely want him to do the role of the AI and I Remember, Reaching for the Stars. And actually, he did, in fact, narrate I Remember, which his portrayal of the AI blew me away. The story was, you could say that the story was written specifically for him. I dreamed of the day that he would narrate it. But unfortunately, by the time it was done, he had just gone off of YouTube for unknown reasons, and I was saddened by that. But a year later, other people had already narrated it, and it was fairly popular. I was happy. I got 25 little upvotes on Reddit, which to me at the time was a lot.
Hey man,
because
every little bit.
yeah, I mean, I'm a nobody, but those 25 people enjoyed my work enough to upvote it, and that meant a lot to me. And by that time, I'd also written another few stories. And this was just before I ended up writing Reaching for the Stars, and I sent it to him because he had just gotten back on YouTube, and I figured, well, what the hell? Why not? I'm gonna send it out to him. I'm gonna send him this email telling him about how he inspired the story and all this, and God willing, he'll narrate it. Because other people made excellent narrations, including yourself, but I needed him to narrate it. And then he did, and I won't lie. Listening to his version of it brought a tear to my eye.
That's awesome. I feel like that's the case with a lot of creepypasta authors. Maybe not like the original stuff, but I know I've gotten emails from people that said, "Hey, I listened to the way you narrate and I wrote the story and I want you to read it." I feel like it's not that far-fetched or weird. That person's voice inspires a character inside your head that, you want them to portray. Was there anything that like you wanted to add about your history, about your work, about
I
anything?
would
Did you want to talk about your book a little bit?
Oh, well, well, first and foremost, I would like to say I would have definitely liked to have met Litterbot and Myuu in person so that I could have thanked them, for helping inspire the work that would eventually go on to inspire the rest of my book, The Nexus Chronicles, which, as Darkness Tales told you all before, you will find in the description below. I hope you all enjoy it. You can also find a sample there, so you can get a little taste for what's to come when you get it for only $3 on Kindle and $7.95 for the physical copy.
I recommend the hard copy for sure. It's like a collector's item. It sits on my shelf. I finished reading all the stories in it. And there's something about having a physical book in your hand from like one of your favorite authors. Because whenever you hit it big one day, I'm going to be like, I got his first book. So you guys aren't as special as I am. Whatever.
Yes. I would actually have to agree with that, not just because it's my book, but I've always preferred a physical copy of a book in my hand. The smell of the paper, the feeling of the pages in your hand. There's something so satisfying about it. If it weren't for the fact that it's heavy carrying all those books, it would be perfect.
Yeah. And that's kind of it. Like, it adds to the experience of the story. Just having a book instead of looking like at a small LED screen on your phone or like on a tablet or something. It's softer on the eyes and it's easier to focus on the story instead of having to adjust your brightness and this and that.
This is true.
I did have a couple questions. Like, when did you first conceptualize the idea of, I want to publish a book? Was that something that's been in your head for a long time?
It was a dream that first popped into my head back when I was in high school, when I was first writing stories, which I have no problem admitting were just god-awful. But I knew that the moment I started writing that I don't want this to just be a hobby. This is more to me than that. I want to have my stories read all over the world. I want people to read them and be touched by them. I want them to share them with their friends. It was never about fame or anything like that, which is another reason why I don't use my actual name, because this isn't about me. This is about the stories and the characters inside them. And that's why I knew that if I was going to get my work out there, I needed to write a book. Even in this day and age of the internet and all this technology where you can share things with people all over the world, it's so easy to get buried in all the noise, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's important, especially for an author, for you to stand out, because we live in a day and age where we can watch videos all the livelong day. We can play video games, which in my opinion are the ultimate culmination of every other art form, just brought together. You know, writing, art, music, acting. I love it all.
Yeah.
And with all these great things to distract you all the livelong day, who would want to read? So I'm very well aware of this. The times are changing. However, at the end of the day, I'm a storyteller. I'm a writer. So I need to write a book to get those few that are still reading to know and maybe share it with their friends, you know, be like, if they like it, of course, to be like, right. Hey man, I really love this book. It's great. You know, you could, here, take a look at it. And you know, I want the book to be engaging enough where even their friends who don't like to read will just read the first page and just be like, oh wow, that's good. I need to see what's going on here.
Yeah, and I mean, you did a very good job of that, especially in this book, like having multiple stories, and you are very good at initially getting the hook down. Like those first few sentences you're very good at, which is one of the most important things, in my opinion, for an author.
Oh, absolutely. Introducing a story is like, it's like introducing a person. You have to create an excellent first impression. Now, to tell you the truth, when I write, that is the last thing on my mind. I just write what comes to mind. I want to tell the story that comes from inside, you know?
Yeah.
But apparently, these stories are able to grab the reader from the get-go. At least that's what I've been told. I make no assumptions that I'm good or bad. I just hope to please people with what I produce.
Yeah, I think you accomplished that for sure.
Well, thank you. It really makes me happy to hear when someone enjoys my work. You know, it's just, it really encourages me to keep going. It really does.
Yeah, I feel like support definitely does that. I wanted to ask you, because your avatar in the artwork is all very consistent and very interesting. You have like this bird skull going on. I'll have a photo on the screen, of course. Where did that come from?
The Dark Scholar. Wow, okay. The Dark Scholar was a name that I came up with a while back. I don't know where it specifically came from. It might have simply just been inspired by the fact that everyone else at the time had no face, but they had a name. They had this character that they were playing, Mr. Creepypasta. Before he was known as Spike to me, he was Mr. Creepypasta. He was that character. He was the blue man. And then there was Creepypasta with that awesome mask and all that. And I felt that in order for me to get my work known in this community where there's so much going on all the time, I must create a name. I have to create a persona. And so the Dark Scholar was born. I mean, I love books. I love learning about history and the like. And, you know, I just figured, I'm a bit of a scholar and I like dark things. So there you go. The name itself was not really like something that took a lot of thought. But as for the character, the look, the bird creature, while I was going through that ordeal, shortly before writing Reaching for the Stars, that friend whom I mentioned earlier, she's an artist. She draws, casually. And one night she had a nightmare. And in order to get rid of the creature in her head, the nightmarish creature, she drew it. Apparently it helps her get rid of her nightmares. She draws them onto paper. And from there on, that's where they stay. Oh, yes, it certainly is.
So,
and then I looked at it, and it was this sharp, gothic, dark character that she drew in perfect black ink. And the moment I saw it, I fell in love. I saw it and I'm like, I need to have this. And I ask her, can I keep this? And she looks at me like this is weird. Like, why would you want to keep this? Look at it. It's creepy. She said all of this with her eyes. And I looked at her and I told her with my eyes, I need this. And that's where the first picture came from.
That's pretty cool, actually. That's a very interesting story. So it just started as like a nightmare creature for her. You
Absolutely.
just felt drawn to it.
Mm-hmm. The Dark Scholar was born from a nightmare.
Oh man, I just got goosebumps. I'm not gonna lie. That was good. That was a very good line you just had there. The Dark Scholar was born from a nightmare.
I mean, it just seems so fitting. What a perfect origin for this drawing, which I will supply you with. Yeah, I'll let you see the first drawing. A few months later, after writing Reaching for the Stars, I think I wrote a few more stories afterwards, I encountered an artist via Twitter who saw my profile pic at the time. And she started to read my stories after we started conversing via Twitter. It's just a random encounter. She read it, she loved my work, and she asked me, do you accept fan art? And I go, well, I never had fan art before, but yes, I would love it. I was honored that anyone even liked me or my character or my work enough in the first place to even want to give me fan art. Another month or two passes and, I'm expecting, just another drawing, a drawing on a little sketch of paper or, a notepad or something of the like. And instead, she comes back to me with this gorgeous, beautifully painted image. Apparently, she had read The Nexus and took inspiration from when the character first revealed himself to the professor. And from there, her gorgeous, mesmerizing piece came out, and I was blown away. I again, for the second time in my life, I fell in love with the Dark Scholar all over again.
Is that the artwork on the cover of the book, or is that your avatar?
No, that artwork was done by another artist, but it is definitely the artwork for my profile pic that you'll find on Twitter and here on Discord,
which is gorgeous as well. It's so interesting.
But that's funny that you mentioned that piece. The cover art for the Nexus Chronicles was originally commissioned by that artist, but a couple things ended up happening. That's not my business to delve into, and unfortunately we had to part ways. However, the day came when I encountered a third artist by the name of Yeah Man Productions.
Oh, okay, so he did this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know him.
I came across this picture from a cover art of a Batman comic, and I love Batman with all my heart and soul. Sounds a little cliche, I know, because he's the popular character, but what can I say? I'm a Bat fan.
You're a Bat fan of Batman. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Continue.
It's all right. So, I'm looking at the art from the cover art. It's simple, yet I love it. It's Batman standing, and in his shadowed silhouette is the city of Gotham. And I looked at that. I'm like, I like that. So I finally come across Yeah Man Productions, and I tell him what I want. I want my character, the Dark Scholar. Send him the full image of my profile pic. I send him the book, the whole book, before it was even published. And I ask him to read all the stories, and then I tell him the character needs to be like this. I send him the image of Batman, put my character in that position, and in his silhouette, I would like several different scenes of your choosing to be inside his body. Now, this is the crazy part. The previous artist, the one who did my profile pic, was taking several months to do the cover art before we unfortunately had to part ways. But this man, he charged only a measly $25 for his cover art piece. I told him I'd give him $50 if he'd get it done within the month. He did it in 3 days.
Oh my God.
He read the book, took scenes that touched him personally, and drew all of that and colored it in only 3 days.
I'm going to throw a link to his social media down below also.
Yes, he most certainly deserves it. He blew me away. When I saw that art, let me tell you, I was just blown away. It was a dream come true. I felt this great weight lifted off my shoulders. For the longest time, I was just this little unknown Reddit author, just a little speck in the massive creepypasta community. But somehow I felt, when I saw that art, Dark, you are gonna make it. And shortly thereafter, the Nexus Chronicles Volume 1 was published. And it was a dream come true just to see it. And then to see you made that dream even more of a reality when you sent me the picture of you at your physical copy shortly thereafterwards. To see someone hold my book in their hands, there's really no feeling akin to it.
Yeah. It definitely, every story in the book gives you an emotional reaction, which is why I've read a lot of books, and this is the only one I sit on my shelf because I feel it's rare. You are just at the beginning of what I hope is a long, flourishing career. And like, I'm excited to have this. At some point, I'm going to have to mail this to you and have you sign it.
I'd be more than happy to.
So
you most certainly earned it.
Oh, thanks, man. Thank you so much. Is there any like closing words? Oh, no, we're not done yet. Do you have any paranormal stories?
Oh, well. I mean, a few. Nothing really creepy. Some people have a lot more interesting stories than mine, but I will tell you that I do most certainly believe in ghosts and spirits and the like, demons and stuff like that. I've most certainly seen my fair share of shadow people over the years, but my most memorable ghost story, in my opinion, was when I came home from work. I used to work at a racetrack, and I would deal with easily hundreds of people on a slow night, over 1,000 on a busy night. And I'm crazy tired. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I got there at 6 in the morning, so it's almost a full 24 hours of work. And I just fell in my bed, and I immediately hear, I'm going to use Dark to substitute my actual name, Dark. And my reaction to that was simply, shut up!
I'm too tired to deal with this right now.
Actually, those were my exact words. I am too tired to deal with this shit. Shut up! I will get an exorcist in here. And they knew I meant it. And I'll tell you what, though. This may sound a little machismo, but I'm not afraid of any ghost or demon, because let me tell you something. If I die this young before I get my books turned into a TV show or a movie, I'm gonna be pissed. Okay, I'm gonna be super pissed. I'm gonna kick whoever killed me. I'm gonna kick their ass for the rest of eternity.
I'm gonna find you. And, I mean, you can't kill them, but if they're already
Which
dead.
actually gave me the idea a long time ago when I first said that to myself. I was always thinking about, like, what would happen, like, if a demon tried to possess somebody, but then the demon found out that the human's will was so ridiculously strong he couldn't dominate him. Instead, he dominated the demon, and slowly but surely he starts actually hunting demons down and absorbing them.
What the
And
heck?
they would call him Legion.
Oh my
That would be
god.
awesome.
I feel like that would be a really good TV show.
Oh, I think so. I mean, I thought it would be an awesome idea. Like the demons call him Legion.
Yeah.
like he's actually
He is Legion.
the monster from prophecy from inside the book. It's like, demon was not born from heaven and cast down to hell. No, he was a human.
And all these ideas are trademarked by the Dark Scholars, so don't even try pitching these
This is
to
true.
people.
This is true. You know, someone once asked me if I was afraid of, like, someone stealing my idea. And I told them no. And they asked me why not. And I said, because the idea is one thing, the execution is another. No one can predict, at least in my eyes, I do not believe that anyone can predict where I'm going to go with my stories. For instance, there will be a sequel to the story, The Lost Ones, in Volume 2. And I just want to say, it's going to be awesome, and you're not going to see it coming.
Oh, I didn't know you were coming out. So, how soon do you plan on getting that volume 2 up and running?
Say again, my friend?
How soon do you plan on getting volume 2 out to the public? Are you going to be posting these stories on Reddit, or are we saving these just for the book?
All of these stories will be put inside the book. None of those will be featured on Reddit. However, for every single person on my Patreon, for only $1 a month, they will get exclusive / early access to stories. They will get samples from chapters from the next volume of the book. They will get samples from the current book. They will get exclusive narrations by me or collaborations by other people. And I'm very excited to announce here on Darkness Tales channel that I am in fact working on an animated adaptation of the first volume of the Nexus Chronicles, which will be released earlier on my Patreon for my patrons.
That is awesome. So I'll make sure to leave a link to your Patreon down below as well. I didn't even know. How did I not know you had a Patreon? I'm going to freaking go there and sign up tonight. Jeez. I guess you're just humble. You didn't feel like, hey, I have a Patreon if you want to give me money. But that's cool. So it's a bunch of like behind the scenes kind of stuff and sneak peeks and into what's going on.
Absolutely. I like to try to release things at least once a month. But yeah, I've never really gone out there and just pushing myself upon people, because honestly I always found it obnoxious whenever people try to do, they're like, oh hey, look at my Patreon, like you ever see those people when you're like on Mr. Creepypasta's channel and then they're like, oh hey, look at my channel. I'm like, what are you doing?
No, I completely
it's one of the
get that.
Like, I've actually talked to Mr. Creepypasta on his Discord channel, and I refused. Even people who knew me, they're like, hey, why didn't you, like, try to pitch your stories to him? I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. If my stories are going to get noticed by someone of his caliber, with that many subscribers and the like, I want it to be off the merits of my stories alone. I don't want to be that guy who's shoving it down people's throats. I want people to genuinely like it.
Right. So you want it to kind of come into his hands on its own accord because it's a good story, not because you put it there.
Yes. I need to prove to myself, not to anybody else, but to myself, that these stories are worth getting noticed. If they're not getting noticed, then clearly I need to step my game up. At least that's how I perceive it.
That's like a very noble way to go about it. I've been very reluctant to, like, I don't comment on other people's videos to try to get subs, and I can understand if they're trying to grow their channel. Like, I'm not a fan of it, but sometimes you just got to respect the hustle. You know what I mean? Like, they're out there trying to make it happen. Personally, I've never done it, and there was a point where all of my videos were getting demonetized just constantly over and over again. And I thought about setting up a Patreon, because my main income isn't from YouTube, but it helps me with, rent and bills and everything. It keeps my head above water. So
naturally,
but I couldn't bring myself to do it. It's hard for me to be like, hey, you should donate money to me, just because I don't know what I have to offer to people. You know what I mean? Like, I would just have tiers where they wouldn't get anything. It would just be people donating money, and I couldn't bring myself to do that. Like with you, you have content that you can give to people for their subscription, which is how it should be done.
I don't believe that I should just ask people for money for no reason. If I'm gonna no, not even that. If they are going to donate money, they deserve something in return.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. And on the subject of the hustle, of course, I always respect the hustle. I'm down here at the bottom. I'm trying to raise myself up. I certainly have posted my book and its cover on several different pages, hoping to get the word out. And I've actually sent a few of my Reddit stories to a few narrators, but the only reason I had done so was simply because I heard their performances on other stories. I loved their voices, and I genuinely felt, hey, you know what? I like their narrations. Maybe they'll like one of my stories. It's not about the fame. I just like hearing my stories come to life.
Right. And I bet it's interesting hearing the same story from different people, and you kind of get a different character with each time it's narrated.
Everyone has a different perspective.
Yeah.
Which actually leads into something else. The inspiration for the very idea of how I'm conducting the Nexus Chronicles and all future volumes. My friend Rene asked me, he goes, "So Dark, when are you going to stop? Like, how many books are you planning on writing?" And I tell him, I don't know. Because my grandmother once went into surgery. She came out, it was fine. It was nothing serious. And her doctor walks in. And then he walks out. And she proceeds to tell me a story about him. And then I realize something. Every single one of us has a story. Just because one person walks out of our story doesn't mean that their story ends. There's a story for each and every single one of us. And we're all just characters walking on and off the stage of life. So with the Nexus Chronicles, I take that idea and I apply it to the universe, or multiverse rather, that I am creating. Every single character has a story, from the AI to the person who made him, to Francine, his wife, and the other survivors, and just it goes on and on and on like the many branches of a tree. It never necessarily has to end. I could theoretically write volumes from today to the day I die, and there would still be room for more to be told.
That's such an interesting way to look at it. So I was just taking that in. I was taking in that comment. I feel like that's a very author brain of you. You kind of see these things, That's pretty freaking cool. Yes.
I don't want to give anything away, like, at all. Maybe privately, just between you and me.
Right.
After this little interview of ours, but I would like to say that there are going to be a lot more surprises in store for you and for the rest of the readers in Volume 2. I would definitely recommend picking it up before we even get to that in the animated adaptation, because it will be quite a while.
Right.
Before then.
Oh, the day it comes out, you're going to message me on Twitter, and I'm going to snag that book.
Well, I will tell you this much. Volume 2 will be bigger, it will be badder, and it will be better than Volume 1.
Awesome. Well, man, is there anything you want to say in closing? We're coming up on an hour, so I just wanted to see if you had anything you wanted to talk about right before the end of this. And then at the end, I'm going to finish up with just reading the back of, the back cover of your book, just so people have an idea of what's going on in the Nexus Chronicles Volume 1.
Well, first and foremost, if you're not already subscribed to the Darkness Tales channel, subscribe right here and now and give a thumbs up for this video. And hey, maybe you should give it a share. It helps out the both of us. And you can find the Nexus Chronicles down in the description below. I really hope you and everyone else listening to this enjoys it. There will be more to come. And thank you for taking the time to listen to both of us. It was certainly an honor for me.
I enjoyed my time. So guys, with that was The Dark Scholar, probably one of my favorite authors from Reddit, known him for a while. Definitely pick up his book, like he said, and let's just take a little glimpse. In a place between all things lies an entity that has and will always be. From there, it watches, collects, and catalogs all knowledge. There are many stories to be told. Stories that tell the beginning, the end, and everything in between. These stories are a few of many. There is so much more to be collected, to be told, to be learned. So I have one question to ask you. What do you wish to know? And as always, my Darkness Militia, have a terrifying evening.